Hey folks, this is Ham the Guinness Gamer here, bringing you my review of the Pax Dei Alpha, the 2-week alpha that was in November/December 2023. I played it for probably about 60 hours over those 2 weeks, and think I'm fairly well placed to review it, quite honestly. So, without further ado, let's get straight into it. First of all, I should start by saying that this is a game that's very, very much in an early state. Obviously, it's an alpha, and we were playtesting it to give the devs feedback. The systems that have clearly been worked on most by devs to date are the crafting, the profession systems, and the building system. Almost everything else is at a very, very rudimentary stage. So I'll talk about the things that aren't included very, very briefly, but obviously there's not much point spending any great time reviewing those when the devs haven't put a great amount of effort into them. So first thing I'm going to talk about is the gathering system, and certain comments to make. The gathering system is pretty well fleshed out. It's pretty good. Like everything else, it needs a bit more work, but there's some really, really positive things to note about it. For example, the rock gathering or the ore gathering is pretty awesome. Like, what you do is you break the rocks apart or the ore apart, and it seems to work like a Russian doll system, where you break it and you can see it cracking and you mine it, but then once you break that and that disappears, there's another slightly smaller rock inside it, and you do the same again and the same again, the same again, until eventually you get down to a tiny wee rock and the last one kind of breaks and the full thing disappears. It takes quite a bit of time to actually take down one vein. I presume that will change with time. As you get a higher skill, it possibly increases in speed. I'm sure it will in the future. It possibly wasn't doing that in alpha. It was difficult to tell, but I'm sure that will help in the future. One thing I will mention here when talking about gathering is there definitely needs to be able to be a way to increase your inventory. I think that the devs have this planned for the future, but you need a way to have bags to essentially to increase your inventory, and hopefully there'll be gathering specific bags as well, for certain bags for mining or certain bags for wood cutting, because there is a decent amount of grind in this game as it is, and I personally like it. It's a wee bit too grindy for some people, but personally I do like it. No risk without reward kind of thing, or should I say, nothing good should come easy. It shouldn't be non-grindy for me. I'm very happy with the level of grind that's in it. But yes, you need bags, and hopefully resource specific bags or gathering specific bags. When talking about that, also chests in the game, for storage of items, chests should have a choosable default privacy setting. So it currently defaults to player only, but when you're placing so many chests and playing in a big enough clan like I was, that becomes very tedious to actually change them all individually to clan only. So right now you can have it player only, clan only, or just open to everybody. You're never really going to have them open to everybody, but it's quite often, if you're playing in a clan, you'll want them open to the clan. But you should be able to change the default setting for when you're placing them, just to take that level of tediousness out of it. The other thing to mention about gathering is right now it's possible for players to settle on spawns of resources, which is a real pain. So towards the end of the alpha, as more and more players were coming in and building, a lot of our local resource spawns were being built on, whether deliberately or accidentally, I don't know. I mean, there was 2 examples of 2 massive clay spawns that had small enough buildings built on them, and I thought somebody's maybe done that deliberately to be a dick. But either way, that needs looked at, where as a server gets busier or an area gets busier, you can't have all of the resource spawns locally being built on and removed. So I don't know whether they would limit the amount of players that can build in a certain area, or the amount of buildings that can be built in a certain area, to try to control that, but it needs controlled in some way. Last thing I'll mention then about gathering is that some items appear to have no use, and The devs again are aware of this, of course. If they're putting them in, they know what happens, but or they know it's the case. But the likes of fir branches and a couple of different things I'll talk about later, a couple of different rock types and stuff that I mined, I didn't appear to have any use for at all. Of course, that's as I say, that's a problem that the devs will be very aware of, but it's obviously still worth mentioning. So moving on, then gathering kind of folds into crafting very naturally. The way the system works in Pax Dei, at least so far, is you gather all your materials, like the way it works in a lot of games. You gather a lot of your materials and then you bring those back to the different workstations, and then you craft those raw materials into something a bit more usable. Now, one thing I will mention that it'd be nice if the devs could find a way to make both the gathering and the crafting processes encourage multiplayer. So for example, you could have buffs for gathering or crafting together. So buffs that maybe increase the yield of whatever you're gathering, or increase the speed at which you gather, because I say it is a wee bit grindy, so if you can reduce the speed, that will be beneficial to people, or increase the XP that you get. So if two people were mining the rock together, you could have one or two or all three of those things increased, and encourage players to play together, because it is an MMO after all. Also, again, I'm sure this is in progress, but it'd be good to have some kind of hub in the game for you to see all of your professions and all of your different levels. So at the minute you're just mining away there, and you might, it pings up in the middle of the screen what mining level you got to, but other than that specific thing happening, you've no idea what level you are or what buffs or bonuses you get for that, so that's fairly rudimentary as it stands. So moving on specifically to crafting, you can't use a cooking hearth, it seems. I couldn't find a way to use a cooking hearth no matter what, so you can place that. That's like the second you've got a cooking fire and then a cooking hearth, which is supposed to be maybe the tier 2 or tier 3 cooking workstation. I couldn't use it at all, but yet I could cook certain things on the cooking fire, so it was working okay. But like a lot of the professions, cooking needs more fleshed out. It needs more content, more recipes, and to say that's probably a general comment to make across all of the different professions, just a general increase in craft and recipes. We also need a better use for the tier 2 wood. All it seems to be used for is burning for charcoal at the minute, whereas it'd be good if maybe you could make a bit nicer furniture or something out of it, and better weapons, better handles, that kind of thing. Some of the crafting feels, in general, it feels a bit punitive, in that there's a bit of there's grinding, the gathering's a bit grindy, the crafting is a bit grindy, and then there's also a chance to fail, which all feels a bit too much. As I say, I don't mind a bit of a grind, but when you're doing all that grind, maybe spend an hour out grinding wood or out grinding iron or whatever, and you're bringing it back and you're smelting it or you're processing it, and then you're failing and losing all of those resources, that's very, very punishing, and it doesn't feel good from player point of view. Now, I know the devs have since confirmed that the chance to fail won't always destroy 100% of the resources as it did in the alpha, so that's good. I mean, it's extremely punishing to lose everything, particularly the higher level you're going, the more you're grinding to get it, and to lose all of them is too punishing. It will lose player base, but they've said, as I say, they've confirmed then that it won't destroy 100%, so you'll get, depending on your level, like your skill level, your profession level, and then depending on an RNG, you will fail certain amounts, and therefore you'll lose certain percentages of the original materials, which I'm okay with, as long as it's not close to 100% generally. If you lose half or you lose a quarter or something, then so be it. It's RNG, and then that you have to, if you're going to lose a quarter chance to fail or whatever, you either want to wait until you're a higher level before making that item, and therefore reducing your chance to fail, or you're willing or you're consciously choosing the risk to make what you're making with the chance to fail that's there. That just needs to be, again, they've confirmed this, but it just needs to be clear to the players that like what the chance to fail is, and what maybe the likelihood of losing resources is, or the quantity of resources that you'll lose if you fail, and then they can make as I say, a conscious decision whether to go ahead with it or to wait. And then if it fails and you lose your resources and it all happens the way it said it was going to happen, you've got nobody else to blame other than yourself. Just be like, well, yeah, I took the risk and it failed for me. What I do really, really like about the crafting and the gathering in general is that the unlocking of different items, of different recipes, is based on finding all of the different ingredients. So once you pick up the ingredients and put them into your inventory, if there's a certain shield or whatever that needs 6 different ingredients and some of them are slightly rare, you'll have no idea about that recipe until you've picked up all of those 6 ingredients, which can be pretty cool, because then that's a great way of controlling the recipes that players have access to. And there could be a really, really rare gem that somebody doesn't have and they've never touched, and they're missing a good amount of crafting recipes then, which is pretty awesome. But then once you pick up that gem, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, now I can make a whole load of presumably rare items and sell it, and make money on it accordingly. In general, though, yes, I love the crafting system. It was very enjoyable for me. I spent a whole lot of my 60 hours engaged in it, in the gathering and the crafting. Needs a bit of work in certain areas, but it's definitely going in a very fun and positive direction. And personally, I would say that the crafting and profession system in an MMO is very, very important to me. It's not important to everybody, and I get that, but it needs to be a sizable amount of content in the game for it to be what I hope it is. There needs to be a good amount of effort put into it, and they're heading in the right direction, definitely, with Pax Dei. Another crafting thing that's completely missing, and again I know about this, needs a farming system, some kind of farming system, and then that will tie in presumably into your cooking system, and maybe even some kind of animal husbandry or something. If I'm not sure if the devs are planning that. I know there's definitely a plan for mounts in the game. It kind of has to be mounts with the size of the map and the lack of fast travel, but all those things all do kind of interact, so it'll be very interesting to see what they come up with there in the future. I love that fletching actually exists as a profession for making bows and arrows, but it might be a difficult profession to fully flesh out as much as the other professions, because you can make bows and arrows and maybe even crossbows and bolts, but what else can you make on top of that? You can have different tiers and different stats for different types of bows and crossbows, and maybe you might have some with better range, better accuracy, but that all kind of depends on the combat system and how that's implemented, and then how you can bring those different stats onto weapons, how that interacts with the combat system, as I say. Professions also, I've seen this kind of talked about by the devs as well, so again it's another thing they're aware of, but the professions need more than one basic resource. The best example of it, or the worst example of it, depending on what way you're looking at it, but was tailoring and flax. There's only one basic resource for tailoring, was flax, and you were, to get the tier 2 item, you maybe needed, I can't remember the exact figures now, but you might have needed like 10 flax or to make the tier 2 item, but then you needed 10 of those tier 2 items to make the tier 3 item, and then 10, it wasn't 10 every time, but basically it was built up where you actually needed to go out and farm like 1,000 flax to be able to make something, the basic resource for tier 4 or tier 5, and then you needed loads of those resources to actually make an item. So that's extremely grindy, too grindy. Whereas to fix that, I don't mind the grind element of going out and having to get lots and lots of resources, but the higher tier you go, that's just starting to become into really excessive numbers. So the way to fix that then would be to have more basic resources. So instead of having to go out to harvest 1,000 flax, maybe you only need to go out and harvest 300 wool or some other type of thread, and then that'll reduce the grind but also give different tiers. You can maybe still grind to the 1,000 flax if that's what you want to do, if there's a whole lot of flax near you or something, but the grind in that respect needs changed, and the easiest way I can think of doing that would be, instead of changing numbers and the amount of excuse me, the amount of flax that's needed. Maybe just bring in a couple of extra basic resources, crafting resources. Another thing I'd mention then is it should be clear what the different tiers of the workbenches are for, the workstations are for. For example, the tool making tier 3 bench appeared to make everything that the tier 1 bench would make, but yet the weaponsmith tier 3 only made tier 2 and 3 weapons, so you also needed to have the tier 1 weaponsmith workstation present. If that's going to be the case and that's deliberate, then there's going to be many tiers of workstations needed to be present at any one time, and then space might become an issue. Now, there could be a sweet spot in there for the devs that where players crafting is essentially limited by your plot space, because you need so many individual workstations for one profession. But that will encourage team play and coordination if that's done right, if that sweet spot's found. What I'll also say is then trivial crafting, so the lower level crafting being done when you're a higher level, it should be instant or pretty close to it. Devs shouldn't be encouraging too much AFK time for players, because I found myself harvesting a whole load of wood, like hundreds and hundreds of logs, and then putting it all on to turn that into planks, and then I was just getting up from my computer and I was going away and doing something for 20 minutes or half an hour, and I was coming back and it was being done. That's too much AFK time, like maybe a couple of minutes or something like that. And then if it encourages you, with an MMO, to get up and have a walk around, go to the toilet or whatever, that's not too bad, but it shouldn't be 20 minutes or half an hour that it takes. That's far too much AFK time to encourage.
So next up is the building system, which in general is fairly well fleshed out. It's one of the parts of the game that they've definitely put more effort to date in. A couple of minor points to make. What could be added for the building system? We need some signs for boxes and signs for buildings. Even a billboard for the town would be pretty good, that you could put tasks and stuff on for other players. That would help with guild management, or clan management, should I say. Now, yeah, as I say, the signs then for boxes and buildings, that's just for organisation purposes. Signs for boxes just to help keep players on the same page regarding where they're putting different resources and everything. What we also probably need more of is more indoor lighting. A lot of the lighting that I put into my building once I had the roof on, it was very, very dim. Now I get that you're using candles, there's obviously no electricity or anything like that, but maybe we could implement some kind of magic into it just to make it slightly less, just brighter, so that you can actually see what you're doing inside your house. Otherwise, people are just gonna, as some of my clan members did, just leave the roof off the house, and then you have plenty of light. But we need to have a reason to force players to put a roof on, whether weather has an impact or something of that kind. Getting wet slows you down, or maybe even some kind of bonus. Valheim has it like a experience bonus and things like that for being at home, and you only get that then if your building's maybe fully enclosed and doors and windows and roofs and such. But that could be implemented. I mentioned Valheim there. The building system in general is very, very similar to Valheim, and it's very, very good. It works really well, the way the different pieces clip together, and you craft the resources for individual bits of walls and ceilings and roofs, and put them and build them all on the map, as you see here in the background that I'm playing. One thing I'll say is that we could maybe do with stronger materials that might be able to build higher. So there's materials in the game like granite and limestone that I actually didn't find a use for, so presumably this is what these are going to be for. They'll maybe be used for higher tiers of building, of structure components, so walls and roofs and things, or maybe they'll be used for different architecture styles. That would be pretty awesome. Both would be welcome additions. The different styles could be influenced maybe even by the availability of higher tier building resources in certain areas. So maybe certain areas, say stone is everywhere, so you have stone no matter where you're living, and you can build your basic buildings out of stone. But then granite is maybe only available in the northwest of one of the heartlands or something, meaning that generally the buildings there have one granite based architecture style. or if you want that style elsewhere, then that you have to go to the effort of transporting the granite across the map. That could be pretty cool. It could mean different regions have different architecture styles, and it's all player made, because for the most part people are going to use the resource that's local, unless they really want to put the effort in to get a particular type across the map. Another thing I'll mention here then about the building is the plot idea is a fantastic idea, and the extra space for allies buildings beside each other, I think that's pretty smart. I think that's pretty genius. It's a great way to encourage towns to be built by players. So for anybody that didn't see in my other videos, the plots, essentially you place a plot, or you choose a plot, and then that's the only place that you can build. The plot was a sizable area of land. Like you can see again here, what I'm building in the background is quite a big building. The plot's quite big, and for now you can actually fit everything into it that you need to. But you have to place that, and you can choose that anywhere in the world, at least anywhere in this map that we're in. But then once you've chosen that, then that's the only place you can build anything. But if you build that side by side with one of your clan members, one of your allies plot, you get a slightly bigger plot. You get a square plot instead of the circular one that you place in the world if you're placing it on your own. So I think that's a really, really good idea, and I hope they keep that in there, because it meant that all of us were building together, and it meant it started to become like a real town. Which is presumably what the devs want to encourage, and it does look fantastic. What I would say in general is the game definitely needs more things like this to encourage team play. One thing to note about the plots are you couldn't actually read the plot names. So the top of the plots always had the player name and whatever they have named the plot. You couldn't read that if the player had built buildings quite high, so they'll maybe need to be increased in height based on the buildings that are being built. But what I would say is that right now the game in general, it doesn't feel like a full MMO. It's more like Valheim with extra players, more than 8. And to get that true MMO feeling, there'll be a whole lot that needs added to it. Lots of small things, I suppose, like that plots, things that I mentioned would be good, but then also much larger things like proper PvP, PvE content that need groups to complete. That'll go a long way to helping that. But as I said earlier, we know that the devs hadn't worked on that before this alpha, so it's due to be included at some point in the future. Comparing it to Valheim there, then it isn't actually necessarily a criticism, because I really, really like Valheim, but there's still a lot to be added then to turn that into a true MMO. The combat then was very limited, and we'll not spend much time talking about it. The devs know that, and they know it needs a lot of work. The one thing I'll mention is the archery was in the game. The drawing the bow was far too fast, and shooting was far too fast. The bows intrigue me though, as I mentioned earlier. The fletching system. The bows obviously are going to tie in with the fletching system somehow, and that'll depend on how the combat is worked. But you could have different speeds of bows and different powers, different damage, and maybe different strength levels required to actually use the bows, or different fletching levels required to use the bows or to use the higher tier bows. So you could link that all in. And therefore you might actually have bows that fire as fast or almost as fast as what we've seen in the alpha, and others that are much slower but much higher in damage. And that might, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure how they'll fully flesh out the fletching system. That might go a long way to making that a proper usable profession that people want to go into if there's enough content in it. If you're going to be a hunter type character, or some kind of maybe even stealth based ranged rogue perhaps, if you're going to want to play the game that way, then you're going to want a bow, and you're going to want to go into fletching then. Another thing to mention about combat, there's basically no need for armor at the minute. I was killing most of the animals in the game while wearing my standard dress, no problem at all, but again, that's due to be worked on by the devs. Minor bugs just to mention that I came across in the game. Some of these have already been fixed, and I'm sure the devs have been been working or notified of the other ones, but I feel like I should mention them anyway. The snapping stops working when building sometimes, and you have to relog. So that's just when you're snapping different walls together or different roofs. It didn't matter what building piece, it just happened regularly. Seemed to be sporadic, but then you had to relog to be able to snap them together again. The HP of the tree when it's chopped down, it doesn't always show while chopping. Sometimes the numerical hotkeys stopped working, and again relogging fixed all of these issues. Rotating, sometimes when you're building at different items, different build pieces, rotating actually changed the height of the build piece in the map, as opposed to rotating its orientation. Sometimes the trees were falling into the air when they were chopped down. Relogging actually respawned all the resources in the area, which obviously could be exploited quite easily. Items, devs again know about this one. Items were taking a while to spawn after logging in, or at the start of the alpha they were taking a couple of minutes, but even after they fixed that they were still taking a few seconds. There's actually a clip here showing the background of them not spawning in at all, my building not spawning in at all, but it was very much there because I'm glitching on the building, but you can't see it here. Then there's floating bags as well after destroying build pieces, like roof pieces that were higher up, just being destroyed and then floating in the air. And the cooking hearth then wouldn't sit on top of the stone foundation, so not only could we not actually use the cooking hearth, but I wasn't able to put it, so it's actually glitched through one of the stone foundations in my building here. General comments to make then, to sum up. Combat system obviously needs work done quite heavily. We know that, the devs know that. Then generally as well, more PvE and PvP content. Again, devs are working on that. We know that, but those are 2 or 3 huge areas that will be the make or break of the game essentially. But as it is, what's been worked on is very, very promising. I enjoyed the 2 weeks I was playing it. I really enjoyed it. And I am a big crafter and a big builder, so I'm always going to enjoy that part of the game. But it is an important part of the game to me and to a lot of MMO players. Crafting does need tweaks here and there and gathering and stuff like that, but it's very, very promising and very, very fun to do. And I mentioned earlier, I enjoy the grind. Not everybody will enjoy the grind. I know a few people definitely thought it was far too grindy, but I was pretty happy with it because I like to have to put the effort in to get the reward. I think that's a thing that MMOs have maybe lost in more recent years. But it's a thing necessary in MMOs, in my opinion, to keep the enjoyment there and keep the challenge there as well. And then the building system is the other part of the game that has been worked on quite extensively to date. And again, it's very fun and engaging and ties in with the crafting system well. And it is grindy, but once you've got your building built, that's you. And you could go on to other content then. So in general, that's just to sum up. And I'm looking forward. The devs have already announced that the next alpha will be in Q1 of 2024. So I can't wait for that. Or the next part of alpha, should I say. Hopefully we get into that and I'll be doing more content on it then. But for now, to the devs of Pax Dei, keep up the good work. You're heading in a fantastic direction. I'm very, very excited to see where this game goes in the future, and I'll be keeping a very close eye on it, on the alphas and generally on the game. But for now, thank you for listening to my review. As I say, I'll be doing plenty more content on it in the future, on Pax Dei in the future, if and when I'm given the opportunity to do so. But for now, wherever you are, goodbye and good luck.